How now, brown cow?
The Human Torch was denied a bank loan. The
I
Human
like bread and
Torch
cheese.
was denied a bank loan. How now, brown cow?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of my unnamed podcast. I'm here with dear friend Christopher Kent. I was going to say his middle name, but I forgot, and there's probably a good reason for that. Now, I want to say that this podcast is likely going to be very different than my last two because of said relationship. It's going to get a little strange. It's probably going to meander. It's likely going to be much funnier than the past two, and it may make a lot less sense until it does. So with that said, I am going to read words that Christopher sent me to introduce him. Jimmy, can you bring up the notes? Thank you, Jimmy. Jimmy's my assistant. It's got it popped up on my phone here now.
Jimmy's your Jamie.
That's right. Christopher has studied and practiced in philosophy, acting, spiritual psychology, soul-centered coaching, clinical mental health counseling, meditation, and yoga. He brings this eclectic background into his work with clients. The ultimate goal of his work is to develop a relationship to the aspect of ourselves that is already inherently free and joyful, self, and to build a beautiful life from that aspect of self. A quote that comes close to summing up his outlook from a Bengali poet, Rabindranath Tagore: I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. Christopher has a literal, much longer and far-reaching yardstick than Anker. Not only is he more well-hung, but he also has more measurable experience in psycho-spiritual work of various kinds, of 100 thousands of hours meditating, working from undeserved populations as a behavioral intervention specialist with traumatized patients, clinical mental health counseling, studies in a post-bachelor psychology degree, not to mention work with hundreds of people in his own practice over the last 8 years, and his master's in transpersonal psychology, and of course, not to mention retreats and plant medicine journeys too. Jimmy, did you check all this? He says yes. He gave me that look. Well, I'm assuming by like hanging, you're referring to like swings, because you swing on a lower hanging swing because you like to jump further because you're a risk taker. And I just want to clarify that. Christopher and I often speak in metaphor. So I'm going to start the show off by asking
We'll go with
this
that.
question. This question. Now you all understand in some way or fashion who this man is in the other box next to me. And the opening question is, Christopher Kent, what part have psychedelics played in creating this man that we just named in so many words? How would you begin answering that question?
That's a tough one. And it's going to require some unpacking. So I've had an experience with psilocybin mushrooms, specific strain, penis envy, a heroic dose, rather, where, well, first let me say this. My first experience, I had about 3 grams, which is a pretty hefty dose of a strong strain, penis envy. Some of you will know that based on your connection with Anker, about the mushroom named penis envy.
Not Christopher's actual penis
Right.
envy.
Just to clarify, that's a different podcast and a projection from Anker. But yes, yeah, very much. So I went from believing in God to knowing God. And I actually just had this conversation with someone recently. I was at a wedding, at my friend's wedding. I'll tie this full circle. And he was talking about believing in God. And I just sort of blurted it out. I was a little tipsy as well. I was playing a role. But I said, I know God. And it was from that first journey that I went from a believer to having a direct experience with the divine. Furthermore, to make a really long story short, because you've heard it a bunch of times, I could get into some level of detail, but with the heroic dose that I did alone, I'm not suggesting that someone else do this, but I'm not suggesting that someone else do this. Simply speaking of my own experience, there was this kind of insight, I would say that it was always this way, that who I was is no different than who I was before, and who I am now, and who I will continue to be as consciousness and as one with whatever this is. And I mean whatever this is as in reality. Like there's no evidence for separation. It's just all one. And that's why I'm answering this question in this way, Anker, because
Yes.
you said what role did psychedelics play, or do psychedelics play into who I am now? It's inextricable, because I had that experience that I'm speaking of, and yet at the same time, what was revealed to me was that I was no different before that. But it's like the question of walking on a journey and arriving at the destination. Would I have arrived at that destination had I not walked that journey? I don't know.
So non-dual of you. But yes, I remember that story, and I understand that it was a pivotal one
Mm-hmm.
in your journey. And I think maybe bringing a couple details into this could be helpful. So 3-ish grams of albino penis envy, the stronger of the penis envies, alone in the basement, right, of your family's home. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, you're wrong already. So the 3 grams, I was with my then partner, and she was holding space for me. She'd never done that before, but I had instructed her how I wanted her to support me for that journey. And I met God. That's when I went from believing in God to feeling like gratitude and oneness and worthiness, which I could get into. And then the heroic dose was maybe a month or two later, like 8 or 9 grams of penis envy mushrooms.
Getting to the point, which of these journeys led you to believe that you're actually a real life Super Saiyan?
That was before the journeys.
No, it was one of your journeys. I remember you saying, like, you had this moment, like, I am this. This is who I am. And you came back believing, like, I'm an actual real life savior of humanity from another planet. No? Am I making this up?
I've definitely had moments of recognizing that archetype of Goku, who's a Super Saiyan. For the Dragon Ball Z fans, you know what we're talking about. Who is this alien that comes to Earth to basically save not only planet Earth, but the entire cosmos. And I do feel that is really related to that narrative has influenced my life path, but a specific journey where that came through, I think you are to some degree making that up, which is beautiful. I love that you have that.
I might be confusing
memory.
that with your realization that you are an Anunnaki alien.
Do you want to talk about that?
You want to talk about that? Are we talking about that?
That's a whole other journey, but I could get into that. Yeah.
Well, hold on. Are we complete with this last dialogue? Do you feel like you've painted a picture as to how psychedelics have helped shape you primarily to who you are now?
Yeah, and they continue to, just like, I'll just say this. There are certain experiences that have a higher, like, signature, energetic, emotional signature. And certainly these experiences, I do feel, continue to inform who I am. But so do my relationships, and so does talking to you right now. So does going, like, everything seems to affect that. And maybe that is also related to my outlook on life and my openness, which I do think that I was already an open person, and then that kind of blew the floodgates of openness even further open, which, they've done psychological studies how psilocybin does exactly that. It increases people's personality trait of openness to a greater degree.
Yes.
So yeah, feels pretty complete there.
Okay. Well, round 1 complete. Round 2. And I guess since we're having a conversation, maybe I'll just turn it over to you and see where you want to take it for the next handful of minutes. How do you like that idea?
I love it. What is the most underwhelming experience that you've had with psychedelics or plant medicine journey? Like, you had an idea that this was going to be the big thing. And then it's just like crickets. What is the most underwhelming experience?
Well, ayahuasca might sound as a surprise, but ayahuasca is the most tricky and unpredictable medicine there is. When I returned to ayahuasca about a year and a half ago with the community here in the valley, literally like every time I sat with them, which must have been like 3 or 4 times, and going in like 3, 4 cups, nothing except maybe a few belly grumbles and a few farts, little glimmers in the vision. But I'm like, well, I know something's happening because I have faith. There's things happening, but I'm not noticing anything. And I was underwhelmed because I had expectations. Really, nothing else is coming up though. The first time I did ayahuasca was also quite underwhelming. And I come to realize that in the beginning of one's relationship with that medicine, if you aren't very physiologically and biologically clear and cleansed, it does that work first.
Mm-hmm.
And so before you have the wild cosmological visions, you're going to be puking and burping and shitting. I felt something the next day, like a clearing, but no wild, pretty lights. Oh, that all came in the Amazon, let me tell you. And I didn't need it the first time around. But yeah, and I think this really has to do with like the narratives out there. People want these big experiences. They want the
Spectacle.
downloads. They want the spectacle. They
The
want the
golden
show.
goodie.
They want the big American theater of psychedelics and downloads and entities and beings, except when they glom onto you and they cause you trauma. Well, then they don't want it, right?
Don't
And so be grateful if you have an experience that is easy, because things are still happening, and you got off the hook. Sometimes there are hooks. All right. I will let you ask another question because
Perfect.
that was a pretty easy one.
Yeah, that was easy. It only took you 2 minutes. So, next question. What is the most embarrassing moment in journeying with psychedelics? Now, I was going to ask personally, only you, but I guess that would extend if it was, of course, in integrity to share. It could be journeying with somebody else. But I am curious, personally for you, what is the most awkward, embarrassing, like pants down in front of everyone? Oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening.
You want to hear about
Experience that you've
personally,
had.
not
Yes.
that I have had. Embarrassing. Honestly, nothing's jumping up. And if something was, like, I'd say it. I mean, I've had experiences where, like, I pooped myself. Like,
But that wasn't embarrassing for you.
yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, but there's no big tale to that. There's nothing really like intriguing to share there. Like,
You shit yourself.
Oh,
You got
I
it.
have something. Oh, well, this is edgy. This is really edgy.
That's why I asked.
Y'all are in for it. Okay, applauding my honesty. All right. So, to tee this up, this is hot on the heels of when I returned from the Amazon, and I was a fucking mess. And I started to receive work from people in my community that showed me the way that I do it now. And so this story encapsulates the inspiration for me to do this work, which is a combination of psycho-spiritual integration coaching, men's work, and medicine work. And so, yeah, I need to really do a lot of setup for this to feel safe to share the topic.
Well, brother, this is between you and I in full confidence, and anyone all over the world that listens to this podcast. So
yeah, I mean, it's live streaming, so it couldn't be more vulnerable. I've never done it this way before, but I shared this story in close confidence. And you know what? No, nothing to hide here, because it's all visionary, imaginal. We don't even know what it means. So there are 3 men running this retreat, and one of these men, he's still to this day, I have this like really interesting relationship with. Like, he's such a powerful teacher, the way he commands attention from men in men's work, and he's a bisexual man. So at first I'm like why does he command so much respect from me? Like, this is strange. And like, I'm leaning into this. Like, if a man of this like gender fluidity and confidence in it can like have me on the leash and sitting on the edge of my seat receiving teachings about men's work in psychedelics. Like, whoa.
If you're
Big
dude, if you're
download here.
talking about me right now, I don't identify as bisexual, by the
This
way.
isn't you. No.
Oh, okay.
So these retreats are like 4 days out in the northern redwoods. We're doing lots of activities and programming around the archetypes, around the basics of tantra, the wild man. And the first night we get together, do MDMA, and the second night is like hero's journey, 5+ grams for everyone in a big circle outside under the stars, right? And so I'm in rapture one of these nights with the mushrooms, just like they are taking me. And I'm participating, I didn't think it was a full-on ego death because I felt like I was still alive, but I was experiencing so much incorporation, like the mushrooms were moving me, and I was singing and moving and dancing all in my seat, and that felt cool, no fear there. And then I opened my eyes for a bit, and like I held my hand out in front of me, and the stars and the planets were like, as I was moving my hand, I saw little threads to them, and like I saw everything moving and the geometry around them. I'm like, ooh, full-on embodied understanding of the connection between me and the cosmos. And then at some point, there was a starburst of color, and there's like 2 figures in the middle. I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And like it came closer and closer until I saw it was me and that teacher of mine. I'm like, oh, okay, me and this guy in the middle. And we were making love. And I'm like, hold on a second. What's going on? What does this mean? This is a vision. This isn't actually me. I'm observing me. Is it a part of me? Is this the future? I don't know. But in that moment too, the feeling I was having, it wasn't fear.
Arousal.
It was arousal. Bliss. It wasn't arousal. No, okay. It was like the bliss, like equanimous, unbiased kind of bliss.
Okay.
And so being a good psychonaut, I didn't even wait to the integration circle the next day to share that. Hours later, we're sitting around a fire with a prasad, and I'm like, guys, I need to share this. And I look over at the facilitator, like, I had a vision of having sex with you.
In the cosmos.
I'm not trying to get any feedback or validation, but that happened, and I'm feeling a lot of things around it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Never had anything remotely close to that happen that felt so vivid and so realistic, so lucid. It's always been like beings and shapes and like creatures and plants, but like, what the hell? And I couldn't help but think, there are parts of me like, is this some kind of like magic he's casting upon me? Because not only is he this like gender fluid teacher, he's also deeply working in like tantric spaces, and he's got this like this command over creative and sexual energy. And even that part of him I find interesting. I'm like, wow, he has this mastery in so many places. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, man. Like some part of me was responding in that way, and I couldn't tell if it was external or was it internal. I just had that vision. It's probably the weirdest thing that's happened to me in the journey. Yeah, I never felt more challenged to share any other experience I've had.
And now you just shared it publicly here. Congratulations, my friend.
Yeah, I'm free. I am unburdened.
It's really reminiscent of a dream that you had with me at your house.
I like where this is going.
It reminds me of that. Totally not gay.
It wasn't a dream. Was it a dream?
Well, it was a dream.
It was a dream. Oh, can I share that?
Please go be my guest.
So I'm sharing this podcast. All in the spirit of men and how to sustain and build testosterone and strength. It's not just in the supplements, it's in spending time with our brothers. And at some point, last time Christopher was here, he came over one night and he kept inviting himself to stay night over night. And before you know, we were like roommates for 2 weeks. And I'm like, I guess this is okay. And there was one night where, and by the way, like my bed setup is a couple big mattresses, super comfortable and plush, but this on the floor. It's like a big den, very Dionysian.
Big Dionysian heterosexual den.
Yeah. So he's sleeping on one, the bigger one, because I'm a gentleman, and I'm sleeping in the corner on the softer one, which I'm finding out is not as good for my back. And this one night I had this dream that, and correct me if I'm not getting this wrong, because I've also shared it with you, that you were I think it was me like looking out across into my kitchen and seeing you walking back and across through the threshold like naked.
Mm.
Yeah.
Fully torqued. No.
Yeah, you were aroused. And I'm like, what? And then shortly afterwards, I wake up from my own fully torquedness. And I'm like, this is interesting. I haven't been aroused through a raging erection in a long time. Good sign, vitality. I know that that is a good thing, but I'm also connecting the dots. I'm like, I just had this dream about my good friend running around naked, and I'm waking up with a boner. And then I did think back to like that vision. I'm like, what's going on? Like, is there some really strong gay part of me that's trying to like come alive? Like, or like,
So you did
healing?
connect to that vision. That's interesting too. Of that.
I may have.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then the morning, Christopher and I spoke about it, and we realized that we had very similar experiences. Like, not only did he wake up around the same time with a raging erection, and somehow we didn't even notice each other, but did you have maybe had similar dreams? We spoke about it, and the outcome was that I realized that when men spend this much time together, especially if they're doing psychedelics, which we probably were, our cycles also align. Our cycles are daily cycles, not like
boner cycles.
Monthly. Yeah, bonus cycles. If you're waking up with like a raging hard on throughout the night, especially in the morning, you're doing well as a man. And I noticed so much more of that when I was spending like 2 weeks with one of my best friends here in the mountains, just like cohabitating, being near each other's bodies, and it's like feeding off of that cellular energy. And they talk about this in the Myth of Iron John. You receive the codes, the downloads, transmissions, whatever new age terms you want to use, just by being around your father, just by being around your mentor. And that doesn't end there. It's from being around teachers of all forms, like your friends, like your brothers. And so I can't wait till you get back, because as soon as you get back, I'm taking you from Zlaka, and you're going to be here for a while. It'll be upon your will. Anything else you want to add to that story?
Yeah, there's a couple distinctions that I want to make here. So the dream, my dream, I wasn't having a dream similar to you. I don't remember what dream I was having, but the distinction that I want to make is I was woken up by my erection. And
Yes,
that rare,
as I
like,
was.
exactly at approximately the same time. And so I just want to clarify that it's not like I woke up and I was like, what is this? No, the thing that woke me up is the incredibly hard sensation of said erection.
Like the urge,
just to clarify,
the literal urge to create woke us both up from the dream state, from the liminal imaginal state.
And you were, I mean, honestly, maybe you were just picking up on, similar to this dude, like this dude, if he has certain tantric powers, and maybe he's got a strong field of, I don't even know if projection would be the right word, but like a big net, and maybe you're sensitive enough that you were picking up on that and then seeing it in the sky. And similarly, maybe you were also in some sub unconscious dream world picking up on the fact that I was laying nearby, fully torqued.
Right, exactly.
Like,
one of the ways I was interpreting that vision of me having sex with this man is like, is this what I'm picking up from him? Is this his desire in my field of vision? I don't know. We can never really, truly, fully know what it means unless we give it a lot of thought, a lot of practice. But this one still hasn't come clear to me, man. Like what that meant, honestly.
Dude, I just want to touch on this point, because I did listen to your last podcast, and it has to do with this whole making meaning out of these experiences. And I definitely suggest tuning into that one for anyone that hasn't, with Grant. But they talked about, just to lay the context, like something around when we reveal the experience that we had, it can sometimes water it down. There can be this, and not casting pearls before swine, and also keeping the sacred sacred. And I was thinking about that entering into this conversation and what we might talk about. So I appreciated that. And further, with the first experience, I'm kind of going back to the heroic dose that we were talking about. The first thing that was apparent to me there, Anker, was the ineffable nature of it. As in, what I mean is, even if I wanted to talk about it, I couldn't. I mean, I was rendered incapable for a very specific reason, that what I was experiencing and still experiences, that the same thing right now is talking to itself, with itself, by itself, making noises to like try and point to something objective or specific. And yet from that vantage point, it didn't even really matter, because it's all the same thing lifing itself. And so I was just brought back to that point. I was like, wow, that's so interesting, because the first thing that was revealed to me is the hilarity, the cosmic joke of the fact that even if I wanted to talk about it, I couldn't, yet I do, and I try to, and that's the name of my podcast, by the way, Unspeakable Bliss. And it's for that reason that I find a great joy in attempting to make not idols, but attempting to make art, poetry, whatever it may be, as a gift to that ineffable gift that I feel, not even, I can't even say that I received, but I became aware of, something like that. So
Why not receiving? Because that's information you didn't have before. Yes, in your non-dual way, yes, we have it, but aware of it. Receiving awareness is a receipt.
yeah,
And
totally. Yeah, it's receiving
so
a gift. Absolutely.
I know exactly what you're speaking about. It's
Mm-hmm.
that I think the best way the psychedelic community has approximated this is a primary religious or a primary spiritual experience. That
Absolutely.
understanding
Yeah.
of like, oh, it's all okay. I'm all of this. It's all perfect. And if, for me, it always feels like a kind of like a wink and a nod. There's humor to it, deep humor to it. And every
Totally.
time I come close to that space again, it feels funny. It feels like someone's lifting like the curtain behind the stage, and everyone else in my life is an actor, and I'm on the Truman Show. Like, and we've heard these tropes and memes before, so there's something to that. And God, it makes me wonder if like God's a comedian above all, because I've heard this story enough, and it's always got a trickster angle to
Man, yeah,
it.
and I don't know if I shared this with you in an audio message recently, but I was literally reflecting on exactly this, and to me, this is actually the most. I mean, there's two very embarrassing moments, but there's a moment of remembrance or recognition where it very much so feels like there are all of my loved ones, all of my friends, all of my family, regardless of their interest in spirituality or meditation or psychedelics, and they're kind of looking at me like, I knew you'd remember. You're just, and it feels embarrassing to me. I feel
Like,
almost
welcome
like,
back.
oh, yeah, how was I out there looking for the thing that I am on this mission to create a spiritual personality around this thing, even though this is the way that it was. And there's this very real feeling of, you said a wink, but to me, it's like all of my loved ones just looking at me like, we need you to remember, we need to get back here. And
Exactly.
yeah,
So let's
humiliating and
talk about
humbling.
that.
Yeah, go for
Why
it.
is it that there is a patterning across so many different kinds of human beings from so many different backgrounds achieving this experience from many different apertures and perspectives and uses of different substances and medicines, saying the same thing, using these same words, like a theater, like a drama, right? And I just can't help but think about Dionysus personally, because he was the god that mankind was created from, right? And bliss, ecstasy, that actually means being torn asunder and ripped apart by the Titans in order to become human by putting oneself back together. But you know what we didn't get from Dionysus? We didn't get his heart. His
Or the
heart wasn't,
orgies.
yeah, yeah. But mythologically, well, um,
That's
and I feel like
another
that part
story.
of the myth is interesting because it's up to us to recreate our connection to the heart in the end. But man, like there's something about this I'm really grokking. And part of me is like, well, this could just be your. No, it's not just my experience. People have told me these same exact words that it feels this way: the wink, the nod, the comedy. They're like, hey, welcome home. Did you forget? What is that? What does that mean?
Man, I mean, my best guess is that we're looking in on some fundamental structure of a shared non-dual, we could use that word, but we could also just say a shared reality, and that there's going to be a similar, and this is just my theory, but it's my, idea that this might be the case were from different perspectives, different cultures, different, who knows how far back stories around this would go. But if there's a collective story like that, maybe it's because we're all looking at the same thing from a different angle. It's simplistic,
we are looking at the same thing with a different angle, but the fact that these same memes and words and tropes are used to describe this rather ineffable experience, I think it says something about humanity as a whole right now. It could be a zeitgeist thing, or it could just be a human thing that we feel the comedy of it. Well, I don't want to beat this one to death. I think it's a good place to set that one down, unless you're feeling something really bubbling up. So I'm ready to go to round 3.
I want to point this out because you pointed at it with the mystical experience. There's some study that was done that was comparing a bona fide, as much as it can be bona fide, scientific mystical experience. It had a number of check markers on it, and they were comparing these people, who I believe they were part of a religious, had different religious affiliations, like priests, rabbis, different leaders who had a mystical experience. And they were comparing it to people that had high doses. I believe the study was with mushrooms, and it checked all of the boxes of having this fundamental mystical experience, like no different. They actually couldn't, they gave them, the people that were part of this test, the people that had the non-psychedelic mystical experience, and then they also gave them the outline of the people that had the mystical experience with psychedelics, but they didn't have the information about it being with psychedelics or not in there. And the people that were reading these, they could not distinguish the difference between the mystical experience without psychedelics and with psychedelics. And I think that's pointing to what we were just talking about in some way, but also to the fact that, you know, someone could listen to this and say, oh yeah, well, that was just you were on a trip or whatever. And someone could say that. And I'm like, all right, this is my experience. And I'm saying it checks out as to the mystical experience questionnaire without psychedelics as well. I find that interesting.
Yeah. Interesting to note that insofar as we can quantify these things from our limited capacity, but it's important to attempt it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can't talk about it.
Unspeakable bliss.
Unspeakable bliss. We're talking about it. It's a paradox in itself. Okay. Word on the street is that you fancy yourself a heavyweight psychonaut. I'd like to know the following then. What is the number of the most amount of psychedelics you've done at once? What were those psychedelics? Where were you? Why did you do it? And how did it feel?
Most amount at one time. Dude, I don't know if it's been any more. Now, I am somewhat of a purist, and a purist as in I do enjoy to have one main stage party member inside me at one time. But dude, from my memory, I think it's when I was with you and we were at the drum circle with Merlin, and it was Wachuma and LSD. I don't know that I've ever had more than 2 psychedelic substances inside me at one time. I know you take the cake on that by at least 7. Just saying.
It's a matter of capacity and refining one's vessel.
Yeah, I don't think it's more than that, man. I think it's just those 2. Maybe there's one that I'm not thinking of where there was 3.
And I'm sure that there was hape involved that night.
And like or cannabis or something like that.
Yeah,
but
these count. They're allies.
Yeah, but not rape is not a psychedelic exactly, nor is cannabis. But I think there can be an
cannabis
argument
is
for that.
For sure.
Yeah, technically it is.
And tobacco in the right context is a medicine. In fact, out in the Amazon, tabaqueros are highly revered, even beyond ayahuasqueros for their work. But yeah,
so it's a stretch, but we'll say like 4.
So it's a stretch. 4,
maybe 5,
4,
maybe 5. Like let's say if there was a microdose of mushrooms or something.
What makes that experience stand out to you?
dude, I'm sitting on top of a drum, and
Well, there we go.
we're at a drum circle, and I'm looking down at this drum. And by the way, let's just paint a little bit of a context. I'm at this drum circle with Anker, and he has an LSD cookie, and he says, "Do you want to split this cookie with me?" Or no, dude, you made some kind of offering, and I was like, "Well, how much is in it?" And from what I
I didn't
remember,
want
you
all
were
of
like,
it. I knew that.
"Yeah, yeah." And you're like, "Well, I don't really know," I think was your general answer. And I was like, "Well,
It's
like,
true.
okay, let's split the cookie." And then the next thing you know, like I'm sitting there stringing up this drum, but also having to focus on my breathing because I'm like, this is some strong LSD, and I am being taught how to string an instrument that I've never strung and cleaned before. But what better time to learn than right now? And our other friend was there. I won't name this gentleman's name, but he had some very strong wachuma. And I went up to him and I said, "Hey, I heard you got some wachuma to share." And he said, "Yeah." And he was very reverent in the way that he gave it to me. And that wasn't my first time with either of these medicines. I do want to point that out as well.
Of course not.
And I said to this person, I said, "Well, I'll just have a little bit because I'm also having an experience right now." And he poured me a cup and he said, "You'll have what everyone else is having." And I'm just like, "Okay, all right, great." So I drink it down. It was very cactusy. And
Yeah.
yeah, when this was kicking in, man, like in full force, it felt like I returned to uh, a really very sexual, creative place. And I mean creative in the way of creating music, but also baby making. I had a vision of myself having children with my beloved, with Sladka. That was also one of the things that made this very significant. I even celebrated after. I was like, "I'm going to be a father." And people were like, "Is she
That's right.
pregnant?"
I remember
Remember, you
that.
remember that? And I was like, no, she's not
Not
pregnant
like
or
that.
anything. I see this, and I tapped into that. But the highlight, and this is the highlight that I'll end with sharing, is at one point I look down. I don't play the drums. I mean, I do. We have song circles and I play around with drums, but I've never had a drum class, or I've just played around with drums. And it's in my ancestry as well. My father was a drum player. He's got a whole drum set.
Bears love drums.
Bears love drums. There's another thing we can get into. And I'm looking, I'm like, where is this incredible drumming coming from? And I look down at my hands, and I don't even know how my hands are doing this, but, and I looked around and I was just playing drums, like really, really beautifully, right on point, but kind of doing my own thing, but also syncing up with the music that was being made. And it was just literally coming through my hands. And I mean, man, what an experience to look down at your own hands and be like, wow, this is magnificent music. And then to see that my hands are doing it and I don't know how it's happening.
What did that feel like?
Ecstasy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to corroborate this because so often we can have experiences like that and imagine that we are some like genius musician or poet, and it's absolute shit. But that's just the experience. I was right next to Christopher, and at a few moments, I sat and just in like watching him, like, yeah, man, you get that drum. I was not sober, but in my own experience, I saw that as skilled and like channeled, like happening.
Yeah,
Also, I just had this realization as you were sharing that this shared friend of ours, I know that he's working on bringing his wisdom and his teachings around fatherhood into the world as his gift, as his service. And then in that experience, you realize you're going to become a father. There's some kind of gift there, some kind of
totally.
transmission from this
Yeah.
particular brother. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I do want to reiterate what you said, and I'm happy that you did. I'm certain that I was still, I, this was not an out of body experience. I was very embodied and very there. So it wasn't like, I, my motor skills were actually more refined and turned on. And so, yes, this was not an experience where I think I'm having this experience And then later it's like I see a video of it, or it's like I'm laying there like hitting the drum on it. No, it was in sync with everyone else because we were in a circle of drums and making music together for quite some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was almost having an experience like that. I was incredibly uncomfortable for a while. And here's the thing too, LSD and Wachuma, very similar in how they work upon the body, tryptamine qualities. And so like doubling down on that particular pathway, you know, synergizing, but more of the core medicine. Just, I don't know, I felt like I wanted to bring in some practical understanding, even though I'm not a scientist or a chemist. But yeah, they work well together. This is a good thing to note.
Which I
There's a
asked you
harmony.
about. Yeah, I remember asking you about that. You're
Yeah,
like, yeah.
and Wachuma is often used for such applications as far as tradition goes. Point the finger with this one. Wachuma is a solar medicine. Comes from a cactus. It's like this, reaching up to the sun, and it wants to be used to sing, to dance, to connect. Usually during the day, but you can bring it in at night too. So it's a divinely embodying medicine. Grandfather, equal and opposite in nature and energy to grandmother, ayahuasca. So just a little mythological tip there. We can learn so much about what these medicines do, especially the plants, by observing how they appear in nature. A little harder to do with lab made stuff because you can't really see how it acts in nature. But when you can see it in its natural habitat, you just spend time with that. I'm like, that's what you're getting. You're getting that. Can you connect to that? Can you understand what that is?
All right, bro. Yeah. Same question for you. What is the most amount of psychedelics you've had at one time? Where was it? Who were you with? And then what was so significant about that experience?
Oh, man.
And let's caveat this by saying we're not suggesting that anyone else do any of the things that we're talking about. We're simply sharing our own experiences. And yeah, I think
before
that's important.
Before I go into this story, that's why I asked this question, because I knew you'd hit me back with it, or at least just immediately turn it on me, because it's another one that exposes me. Like, man, I like to get high. That's one thing. Two, I find it important in my line of work to explore the cautionary places, not the high risk places, not the full out red flag contraindicated places, but places where people are like, be careful here. You might not want to do this. And I'm like, oh, really? I should check it out just to see what it's like so I can report on it. And maybe it's not so bad. Maybe there's some benefit. So that said, 9 different medicines. This is including cannabis and hape, tobacco, within the span of a day and a half, let's say. That sound fair? Christopher was with me, so he's going to fact check me on this, because I know parts of me are going to kind of want to dull it down, or maybe not. Maybe I'm going to come full out with guns blazing, kimono wide open.
So far, so good.
But we were heading to this big party at this local space up in the jungle where parties are wild. It was my first time bringing Christopher, so I was excited. We started the day by going to the beach beforehand, and right at the gate, I took some Wachuma.
And cannabis oil, I believe.
I was getting there.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you start with Wachuma because it's a long one. So that was going to take me like into the night without having to commit to being up all night. But it would like lend me through the day. And it's a great base layer. Like the mescaline, the tryptamines are excellent base layers. They pair well with other things, as does cannabis. Cannabis is largely a potentiator and a synergizer. And it brings more of whatever medicine you mix it with in that in that way that cannabis does, through the body. And Wachuma and cannabis are both about the body, embodiment. They go incredibly well together. In fact, the most powerful embodied experience I've had as a practitioner and guide work with my teacher was with those 2 medicines together. So we start the day doing that. And then, I probably was doing hape even before we get to the party. So there's like occasional drop-ins with like tobacco medicine. We get to the party, I'm like, okay, it's been a while. Socializing, dancing, I want to take some MDMA. So I throw that into the mix. and that is 100% safe to mix with LSD or mescaline, tryptamines, wachuma, and cannabis. And then as the night goes on, and as I'm noticing, like, I'm in the tail end of, wait, I did take LSD, didn't I? Did I? Microdose spray. Yes.
I think so.
I microdose sprayed probably before or after the MDMA. Again, I didn't want to take more wachuma, but LSD is a similar effect. Get me through the night. I decided at this point, I'm going to be up all night. So let's go. Now, one of my more favorite and fun medicines to do near the end of a night and near the tail end of other medicines like MDMA is a medicine called GHB. Now, according to these contraindication TRPSIT charts, it's like MDMA, GHB, it's like caution. It's yellow flag. And I know this. And this is why I do my best to take it when I feel I'm at the tail end of an MDMA journey. Now, every time I've done that, there's always been a little discomfort, even if I'm like fasted, even if I've been really clear with other substances. Never mix alcohol with it, though. That's the red flag. Alcohol and GHB. That's a roofie. I think I touched them all. So is that everything?
We can count. Let's count. Let's do a count.
You count.
1, wachuma. 2, cannabis. 3, MDMA. 4,
LSD
rape.
microdose. Oh.
Rape, so tobacco. 5, LSD.
Microdosing.
Microdose of LSD. 6, cacao. I think we were counting cacao to get
cacao is in there. That's right.
Number in there, which that is a medicine. It is very much so a medicine. So we're at 6. What else are we missing? GHB. That's 7.
I don't recall anymore.
Mushrooms?
You must have been reaching for the 9.
Did you have a microdose of mushrooms? Maybe
I probably nibbled on a little mushroom chocolate at some point. That sounds about right.
That would be 8. I don't know what the 9th is, but I do know there was a 10th or the 9th, depending on what the number of this actually is, that you couldn't find at the end of the night.
Right. I was looking for some ketamine at some point, but that didn't happen.
Right.
Oh, I'm glad you brought in the cacao. Cacao is definitely yellow zone when mixing with MDMA. Mm-hmm. And so what I was entering into as new territory that night, because I had in the past combined a little like MDMA with cacao at a time where I felt like, this might be safe. Same thing with G, but never both of them together. And yeah, looking back on that, I wouldn't do it again. I had a terrible bellyache the following morning, and I knew it wasn't because of food. And like by deep diving into the research, like, yeah, I brought that upon myself. It causes real gut issues. I swear I had a shit demon in me. There's some movie clip coming to mind with shit demons. I think it's from Dusk Until Dawn, with a Quentin Tarantino film about vampires. And there was just, I could not let go of this poop. And it was the most excruciating pain. And at that time, you're giving the download about Jimmy the dog coming into my life, which was really true about and clear. And I was hearing that, but I'm also like, I don't know what's happening here. Am I about to like rupture something in my body? And then we get to the gas station, the major gas station we all love to stop at. And it's got bathrooms, and it was a train spotting moment. And like, I just run to this stall. The door doesn't even close all the way. You could hear everything. And like, I got my hands in my guts, like abdominal massage, my shirt's off, I'm like fully into this. And I am just trying to get something to come out of me. And it does. And it wasn't much matter. It wasn't much material. It was just the fact that I combined some things that put me in pain. I learned that lesson. Now I know it for sure. And I will not do that again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as on the same side note that you provided in witnessing me at the drum circle night, very interestingly, I was in between doing some work with ayahuasca. And so during this time, I had one, we could say, substance, which was cacao. I was just fully committed to entering into the next ayahuasca ceremony a week or two later with being as clean as I possibly could. And honestly, even having cacao, a lot of cacao, was pushing my edge for me. But all of that to say, I was sober throughout this entire witnessing of Anker and all of these experiences, from the Wachuma all the way to the car ride on the way home, where it seemed like he was having a demon baby or something coming out of him.
That was quite the buddy system. Yeah. Yeah, that quite a contrast happening there. And again, I want to really impress upon you all, like, I am suggesting that you don't do this. I did it, so you
Good
don't have to.
suggestion.
And I did it because
You didn't even
kind of
have
a
to.
fool. No, I'm kind of a fool. I'm kind of like interested in these spaces. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I do it because it's research. I'm like, no, I'm
Right.
first generation from my family coming into this work. I've got as much trauma and baggage as the next lower middle class blue collar goon from New England, right? I definitely have done my work and I'm a lot more aware of myself than I like to think my predecessors have. And I'm doing the work, but man, I am not about to put myself on a pedestal and like put in this mantle of enlightenment and be like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I'm figuring it out. I was like, go.
Humility, bro. This is like, I don't, that's the thing that I keep coming back to recently as well. It's like, I don't know. I know one thing, and that's that whatever this is, it's all one. But that's all I know. That's all I claim to know. Anything beyond that is truly a mystery. What it is exactly, I just know that I'm part of it.
Yeah, it's just so unfortunate that the whole we are one thing has become such a woke trope. Now, what do we say?
Well, why has it become a trope? Why has that? It's because it's become mimetic and not embodied, maybe? Is that the idea there?
Yeah, yeah, because the new age community who largely like to bypass doing what you know as the work parrot a lot of these truisms like we are all one. And that's true. But they use it in a way to avoid doing things, to avoid the work. And they can't, I've noticed, they're not able to articulate what they really mean by that. Like it's become parroting, it's become its own energy. It's like a force, a word, a phrase coming through people without any clear discernment or choice in actually saying it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds to me like your experience of hearing that is that it's more mimetic and not embodied or experiential. I mean, I know if somebody wants to have that conversation, to me, it's like, okay, how long do you have? Because let's sit down and I will point out in all the ways how this at least is my experiential truth. And I will even point out how they're part of that experiential truth. Not that I'm telling them what their truth is, but I'm pointing to our inextricable connection in this field of being.
Yeah. And
And I
actually,
love that.
I'm just going to out myself there too. I'm like, there's a part of me that feels like it's unfortunate that that term has taken on this meaning. And I was kind of like attacking it a little bit. But yeah, it does
Anything can be
have.
weaponized, man. That's the crazy thing in this, right? Anything, the most incredible experience that you or I have, the most nonviolent communication can be weaponized as violent communication. I mean, anything can be turned into a weapon to then defend some idol that gets
Mhm.
created. Anything. There's no exception to that, including quote unquote spiritual enlightenment,
All right,
which is probably one
round
of the more dangerous.
round six.
Round
My turn.
six.
All
It's your
right.
turn.
So call it what you will, shameless plug, but the journey that you and I did with MDMA, with me as your guide, and with IFS as an asset in that journey, I want to hear your take on it in your story because my experience of that was the pinnacle, the reason why these two modalities can work so well together. I had never experienced an MDMA journey that had gone so powerfully, safely, and miraculously. And I know I've heard the story before. I know you've shared it before, but every time I hear it, there's something new that comes through. And so I would love you to share that once more.
Happy to. So let's talk a little bit about IFS to offer the framing around this. Internal family systems, and of course you correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm a practitioner of informed internal family systems work, whereas Anker actually is certified. So this is one area. Only level 1. Well, still, that's one more level of certification in that arena that I have. But I do the work, and I'm actually practicing it on myself and then with others, and caveating it that it's informed by this approach. So, and I Anker referenced it in my introduction. There's this energy known as self energy, which is inside each one of us, and it's the part, which it's silly to call it a part because it actually holds all of the parts of us, but it's kind, it's compassionate, it's caring. There's a few other C words, curious, and it is basically the place inside each of us that witnessed everything that has happened to us, traumatically, enjoyable, and everything in between. And so it also witnesses the fracturing off of ourself into these different parts. And then with parts work, that Anker would guide me through, where I'd be sitting there connecting to my own self energy and then asking questions from that healed place to parts that have been fragmented or traumatized. And we did that at least a handful of times. That's a pretty accurate summation of parts work, wouldn't you say? Is there anything you would add to that?
One thing that I do hear the experts in parts work mention is that when these protective parts are created, it's at this moment where there's some part of us that believes our body isn't strong enough to handle what is about to come into it, right? There's some nascent, undeveloped part of our subconscious that imagines and is afraid of death, right? And which may be so. It could be some part of some innate intelligence after breaking off from true source and the initial trauma of coming into life. But they say that when that happens, when the impact of the trauma comes, that the self is pushed out of the body and is inhabited by the protector. And then when the protector feels safe enough, it's kind of like moves into the part of the body that it was mostly inhabited in, and the self returns. And that's the part that I keep thinking about. It's like, that would explain how people have these out of body experiences. How when they are brought back to the moment of impact of the trauma they carry, they can see themselves from a different vantage point. There's a connection there for sure. And so, but yes, the self is invincible. You can call it the Holy Spirit. You can call our Buddha nature, whatever you want, but it's there. And it's through the interplay of being in self energy or being the presence of someone else's self energy, the IFS practitioner, that are parts who protect us from anything that looks like that original wound. They learn to trust who you are. They learn to trust our source, our God within, and therefore life itself. And they start to rest and repurpose. And that's the point of IFS work. And one more thing I'll say about that is the therapists who were leading the studies with the FDA, with MDMA assisted psychotherapy for war vets with PTSD, they were some of the top IFS practitioners in the field. And they noticed that with MDMA assisted psychotherapy, miraculous unburdening seems to happen often on its own. And unburdening is when the exiled part that was experiencing the core trauma, whether it's betrayal or just like shame or grief, which is like underneath the anger or the sadness and all those other like high level things, it lets go of that. And usually it takes many sessions of IFS to like be introduced to the exile through the protector to examine, identify the burden, and to find a way to let it go. But with MDMA, because you're brought into an impeccable sense of self energy, it can just happen. And sometimes it happens because you're more open to the guidance and the conversation with an IFS practitioner. So before you get into the story, I kind of want you to say like the real takeaway from it first, like, give them a piece of juicy meat and then go into the story.
Yeah, I can do that. And before I do that, I'll touch on something that you said there too about PTSD and the self energy being kind of catapulted out when that protector part comes online, because it doesn't feel that the organism is safe. I think that's part of the fight or flight or freeze. Like, that's naturally inside of us. And it's actually a function of self energy. This is what I would submit, that then later, because of the trauma, it's like, anything similar to that trauma is going to activate that. But there's nothing wrong with like, that's a very natural thing. I would want, if something traumatizing, which I'll get into with the experience here in a moment with this IFS session, but if something happened to me that I couldn't handle, or, for whatever reason, my mind and body thought I couldn't handle it, I would probably want to dissociate or eject out of self energy, because it's a natural function of the organism protecting itself. The issue is when that keeps coming online to try and do a job that it's no longer needed for. You following what I'm saying here?
I hear where you're going, and we could go off on that rabbit hole for a long time. But
yeah. So the punchline is, there was a lot of, how do I say this? I shouldn't say a lot, but to some degree, I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust my own power. And I felt like that was related to something that I thought happened, that I got clarity through this session that it didn't actually happen, because of the level of self that I was able to access in such a clear way. Anker asked me a question that, and this is also the punchline too, which is, I was able to touch on the most traumatic, the hardest, darkest stuff possible, for two reasons. One, because of the power of the MDMA, and then two, because of the context of the container that was set leading up to it with the IFS sessions. So there was a massive amount of safety enabling me to explore these really, really dark places without any resistance, like with zero fear. And honestly, what had happened at a ayahuasca ceremony maybe a year or two before, truly, man, I think I picked up on something that was somebody else's in the space. And then I had this terrible, I still don't even feel comfortable revealing it publicly, so I won't, but I thought something very terrible happened to me when I was an infant, like unthinkably terrible. And you could use your imagination for what it was. Of course, but it's just one of the worst things that could happen to a child.
Spicy.
Yeah, you could call it spicy, but you asked me very directly. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Just to be clear, the takeaway was you came out of that session with no fear of your power.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. That was the huge thing.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into that.
No fear of my power, and able to trust myself creatively, able to trust myself just in any moment in my lived experience. Whereas before, there was this uncertainty that what I thought was a trauma that I experienced had far-reaching consequences in my life, even beyond what I was aware of. And I was afraid of that. I was very much so afraid of that. So this speaks to a number of different things, man. I mean, this also speaks to, like, I don't know if the technical term you would probably know is transference or what it is, but when you're with another group of people and you pick up something, and then all of a sudden I was questioning, like, is this mine? Did this happen to me? Was it somebody else's? And fortunately, I didn't even anticipate that I would get this clarity in the work that we did together. It was just a cherry on top that I was really grateful for, having come to recognize, oh no, that didn't happen to me. And here's the other thing that I need to point out too, is I had done the forgiveness work around that with what I thought had happened and the parties that were involved. Mm-hmm. Even before this session. I mean, I was even had something like that happened, I was in full forgiveness and compassion for and to me, I think that was important, for the state of self energy that I was able to access there played a role in the fact that I wasn't holding on to anger or resentment or
Yeah.
any ill feelings towards, like, I had gone and did the work of, okay, you know what, if this happened, I'm going to make peace with it. And so there's a level of compassion because, bro, even though I'm not saying it out loud, if I can make peace with that and can have compassion in my heart for that, I feel like it just helped me have more compassion for anyone else in my life that does something wrong or wrongs me in any way. Where do you want to go with this?
So, well, to recap, you had this experience in an ayahuasca ceremony where you felt like something terrible happened to you when you were very young,
Mm-hmm.
and that had been troubling you for a while. The implications and indications of what that meant. And you were able to make peace with that and what it meant. And there was some connection between that and your connection to your power.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were able to make full peace with that during the MDMA session, you were able to reconnect to your full power and dispel any fear of your power and showing up in your fullness. Is that accurate so far?
There's one addendum to that I would make. I had made peace with being in compassion and forgiveness around if that had happened to me and those that I thought may have been involved with it happening. That happened before our journey.
Got it.
But it was helpful in the sense that when you asked me, you're like, what about this? And I was really checking in and I'm like, that didn't happen. It wasn't me. And that happened during the journey. And then exactly what you said about trusting my own power, that also happened. Everything else was preparatory work leading up to that moment unfolding in the way that it did.
So was there something important that happened when I asked you during the journey with MDMA at that moment, when I asked you, what about this relationship to this potential trauma from your youth, and realizing that it was cleared, or engaging with the clarity and already acceptance around it in that space, did that open up something to happen?
Can you ask it in another way?
Yes. I was trying to lead with that question. What is it that helped you come into full acceptance and trust in your power? What was that turning point? What was the moment?
Okay, this is what it is. So I was giving myself an out to not trust myself by thinking that it was related to something that happened that was in my or subconscious. And therefore, at any given point, I might just screw my life up and then I'll have this thing to blame it on because this thing happened. And in the moment of you asking, and in the really beautiful moment of nothing being there and continual, like, by the way, it's not like this happened in this moment with you and then I just, like, I will continually check in with that after that ceremony because it's been like some 6-7 months since that happened, and there's just nothing there. And when I mean there's nothing there, oh well, then I don't have an excuse or an unconscious, subconscious sabotager that's coming in and saying the reason that you're like this or the reason that you don't trust yourself is because of this thing that happened. And my theory, this is my theory on it, is that I was in such self energy that I had access it's not like I went back to my birth and relived all my memories or anything like that, but I was able to scan my physiology because this has been a very physiological experience, especially with the lower chakras, but in all of my energy system. And when you ask me that, it's like I checked spiritually, I checked the memory, I checked the emotional bank, I checked the physical bank, and I'm like, there's nothing there. It didn't happen.
That's a really great thing about this medicine. When you are asked a really precise question, the answer you receive is honest.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You can't access anything but the truth in that space.
And so that's what's weirdly liberating is the lack of getting anything in the spaces that I was in before, where it was maybe intertangled with other people's stuff. We were not in a group. It was one-on-one, you and I, whereas the ayahuasca ceremony, there's other people in there. I'm picking up on stuff. I don't know whose it is. I'm making meaning out of it. Someone touched me accidentally during it, and I felt like that had to do with the imprinting of that. But my point is because we were alone, it was just you and I, which also mimics the memory as well. By the way, that's another interesting thing. It might sound like the least profound thing because I'm saying to you, there was nothing there, but because there was nothing there, that enabled me to really recreate from my birth or soon after my birth to now, and then to not have a back door to say, oh, well, this pattern's playing out or that's happening because I endured this kind of trauma. No, I didn't actually. I had some kind of memory come from somewhere else, but it might seem underwhelming in the sense that I'm sitting here saying nothing happened, but something did happen.
Yeah, and because of the container being so intimate, just the two of us, there were less variables for you to consider in what you were feeling and experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
You knew that what was happening was largely your own, or in some degree, something that's being activated or recreated because of my presence and what I mean to you at the most.
Yeah, it's all of it combined, and I can't
Yeah.
pick one variable that trumps any
Yeah.
other.
But at least it's just two. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We're at 111. So I feel like now's a good time to start wrapping things up. Um, Man, what a talk. I could keep going, but honestly, I think we're at a good place for now. We'll do a round two.
Been
Let's
juicy.
just say if you had to leave any parting thoughts for listeners who might be considering embarking upon the grand adventure of starting to use entheogens, psychedelics, or plant medicines for the first time intentionally in order to heal and grow and transform, what would be some wise words you might impart to these particular souls?
This
I'm
is
sure they're wise.
well, I don't. I'll do my best. Humbly, I will do my best. My prayer is that they're wise. But speaking from my experience, uh, these realms are so suggestible that even hearing this and whatever I'm about to say could have an influence on someone's experience. But so like just like any other podcast they might listen to, just like anything they might read about a particular substance, and some are more suggestible than others. But what I will say is whatever you are looking for, it is 100% already definitely inside of you. And it's not on the other side of like fundamentally. And I invite anyone that does have an experience. It's like you could take this to the bank of the Holy Spirit and it pays divine dividends. Um, Fundamentally, one will arrive at a point where they see, oh, wow, what I was seeking for in this experience, in this coach, in this mentor, in this plant medicine ceremony, in this retreat, it was something that was already inside of me the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. And that's like the integrity of the mushroom speaking through me because that's what I was shown.
Oh, so you're not claiming this. You're giving this to the mushrooms, just in case anyone takes it the wrong way.
No, thank you for saying that. I recognized it through a mushroom ceremony, but what was revealed is that there are many pathways in. There are many, so whether it's cannabis or meditation or the number of other things we've talked about, or sitting outside looking at a tree, there are infinite ways in, and that's actually what the mushroom did deliver. It's like this is in everything. This is in everything. There's nothing that this isn't inside of, that isn't already this. So yeah, not just that being seen or experienced through mushrooms. That's what my experience was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Make sense?
yeah, and as a very wise and humble and kind and compassionate and funny man once told me, that's a prayer
God
God
can
can
work
work
with.
with. That's
right.
Yeah, you said that, and I love you.
That's,
And that's why
I
I
love
said
you
these
too,
kind
man.
words about you. So, Christopher, thank you for joining this nameless podcast about psychedelics, and we'll do it again sometime.
I look
Aho,
forward to it.
Batako Yasin, and
Whole taco is my essence.
yeah, I was waiting for you to say that. Okay. Good night.
Good day, everyone.